Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Resident and Family Support Council meeting that we hold on the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month at 3 o'clock. I'm Lee Moriarty, and I'm the Deputy State Long-Term Care Ombudsman for Illinois. And I actually would like to also thank the Illinois Pioneer Coalition for allowing us to use their format of Zoom for these meetings. So we appreciate that they allow us to use this. The purpose of these meetings is to empower people with information so they can feel supported while we navigate this long-term care journey, which we know can be very, very confusing and tiresome and hard for people. So that's why we brought these meetings, and we've been doing these meetings now for over, I think it's been 4 years now. And we record them all. So as you've noticed, this meeting is being recorded as well. And then we will share this on our YouTube channel. We have over 80 videos on that channel right now. So know you can always go to it for that support, for that information that you may need while you're navigating this journey. The topics are anywhere from things like today, where it's just tough topics to talk about, to information where you can feel more empowered, such as learning about what a power of attorney really is, what guardianship is, what are your advanced directives, all those types of things. Also, the different type of long-term care communities that exist in Illinois and where you would go to get information on those. How do you make long-term care choices? So we've got a variety of different topics, and I want to make sure that everybody's fully aware of this stuff, share it far and wide, because this is a difficult journey, like I said, and we want to make sure that people feel supported through this journey. Know that if you live in a long-term care community, that you can always reach out to your long-term care ombudsman as well. And I believe Stephen, I haven't seen him yet putting anything into the chat. I don't know if he's joining us in a little bit, but we'll start to be putting information into the chat about how you can get a hold of the ombudsman, as well as how you get in touch with the YouTube channel. And one thing I forgot, we of course have a Facebook channel as well. And on Facebook is where we advertise what the meetings are every week. So make sure you like us so that it comes up when you go into Facebook. It will come up for you that way for what the topic is. So you can see if this is something pertinent for you to be engaging in. But also remember, if you can't make the meeting, we will record it because we understand that not everybody can make the meetings. So with all this being said, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce the topic today and our speakers. So today we've got Kristen and Lynn, Reverend Lynn, joining us today to talk about grief and what this is all about. And we thought this topic was really important right now as we celebrated Mother's Day last weekend on Sunday. And we're approaching Father's Day. And we know that this is a time of year which can really be hard for people, as well as the holidays. And I think really any holiday, because it brings back so many memories for all of us. And many times our parents are central to that, or our spouse is central to that. So we wanted to talk about this because this is something we've never talked about. We've alluded to some of this, but we really haven't talked about it. And this is such a important thing to recognize and talk about. And so we brought two experts here today to come and talk to us about it. So Kristen, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw it out to you first. Share who you are, why this is important to you, that people understand this, and go ahead and we'll bring it over to Lynn as well.
Great. Are you okay if I go ahead and share my slides then?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, let's start by doing that and get us ready here. Okay, there we go. All right. So thank you, Lee, for inviting us today. We're honored to be invited in this space. As Lee mentioned, my name is Kristen James, and I've had the honor in specializing in supporting grieving families for nearly 30 years, including working at Hospice of the North Shore, Journey Care. I was actually at Lurie Children's for 20 years, and now step in the space of working with our statewide organizations really in that space of grief across the lifespan. And before I kick it to Lee, I just want to highlight that we do have a coordinated network. We do have professionals throughout the state of Illinois that we collaborate together really in a specialty of advancing grief care for all of us. So you'll see as we talk throughout today, we also want to empower you with language. We want to empower you with choice and empower you with some resources. So not only will the recording be available, but I'm happy to share with Lee our slides so that you'll have access to resources after today. Reverend
Wonderful. That
Lynn, I'm
would be
going to
great. Well, and what we'll do then is we'll put our slides onto our website, the Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman website, where we put that information for the meeting so that you can be able to access that very easily if anybody would like to review those as well.
That's great. And I do want to invite people as you're comfortable. I saw Lee kind of introduce the chat box. So as we're talking, please feel free if you have a thought, a feeling, anything that you want to include in the chat box, please do. There might be times we invite you to come off the camera or your audio to talk with us as well. But I want to highlight that it is recorded. So we also understand if you want to hold those thoughts, those feelings privately as well. So it's really about what is comfortable for you today. Reverend Lynn?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Kristen and Lee. So nice to be connected with both of you, and terrific to meet all of you who are joining by Zoom. I am interested to learn as much as I am interested in sharing what I might have to share that could empower you. I'm very excited that the focus has been set as a focus on empowerment, and that is certainly a part of my job. I am ordained clergy. I'm ordained in the American Baptist tradition, but I was raised by my father, who was a Missouri Synod Lutheran, very conservative Lutheran, and a mother who was Pentecostal. And I think part of my upbringing sent me on a journey that gave me the permission to ask questions and also the necessity to ask questions. And that has led me to be a chaplain. You may have not encountered a chaplain before, and if you have, I hope it was a positive experience. It is a specific calling, typically slightly different from being a parish minister. And the calling involves basically companioning people through the journey of life, helping people interpret that journey through their own cultural lens, their racial lens, and through a lens of faith if they have one. But being agnostic or being atheist is also a lens of faith. It's a perspective, and we honor that. So, my job is to provide spiritual support to everyone, regardless of their orientation or age. However, I do work at a large retirement community here in Chicago that has what we call a continuum of care. You're probably familiar with that. That means that we have residents who live independently. We have residents who need some assistance. They live in assisted living. We have a memory care unit. We have a subacute rehab unit. We have long-term care, and we have hospice care. So I am here to help people make sure that their spirits stay in good condition while they are on the journey of the end of life or the journey to get stronger, perhaps after a surgery. So it's my great delight to be here. One thing I hope to be able to contribute that people have told me in my years of ministry has been a benefit to them. I sometimes have a word that makes your experience real. Sometimes it'll be a $10 word, and sometimes it will be just the permission to cuss. But all of those things I hope will help make you feel heard and affirmed in what you're going through. So thank you again for including me, and I hope to learn a lot from everyone.
So as we start, we also just want to pause for a moment that we realize whether or not you knew what the topic was today, or if you're just seeing the words grief across your screen, that sometimes that can take our breath a little bit, right? And so I want to extend my gratitude in your courage of staying with us today and staying in this space. But I also want to encourage you to maybe extend a little extra kindness to yourself today. As we talk about things, there may be memories, maybe feelings that you visit or revisit. So just to give yourself a little bit of grace at the end of today as well. Oh. So on that, I just want to invite either again in the chat, to what brought you here today. We want to make sure that Reverend Lynn and I, through our time together, can really also adjust to what your interest and your needs are in this space.
And please, anybody, do feel free to unmute yourself as well. If you're comfortable doing that, we invite you to do that. And like Kristen said, please do feel free to put anything into the chat. I will just start with making a comment about that. I lost a parent when I was younger. My dad died when I was in high school. And, grief can be very you push it aside, I think, sometimes. And when you push it aside, then do you really ever deal with it? And, those are some of the things that I learned as an adult, how to deal and how not to deal. And that not dealing doesn't work so well. And then through the course of time, I lost my brother just a couple of years ago during COVID. And, this is a very, very, very difficult subject. And it's hard to bring up these names without bringing a little bit of a tear to your eye. I'm wondering if anybody else out there feels the same way. Anybody does. I'm wondering if we just got some heads shaking in the background. Um, it does take some courage to bring this to up in front of people, and especially in a virtual space.
Feel free, even if you want to put a name of a person you're thinking, feel free to do that as well. And we just want to kind of honor that space.
I would add in this moment that grief and loss isn't always related to death. I was fortunate to have two parents, as I mentioned, but I lost my mother to depression when I was about 8. And I learned later that my friends at school didn't even know that my mother was living because they never met her and never saw her, only my dad. She did overcome it when I was in my 40s, but there was that grief of losing this dynamic, creative, vital person to a disease like depression. So grief has many, many forms.
I want to reflect back on and sort of the title today that we realized that Mother's Day was this past weekend. We're anticipating Father's Day. So we're here today as mothers, grandmothers, husbands, spouses, fathers. We're here today as grandchildren and grandparents. And really in that space of reflection of those that we lost, those that we still love. And whether that has been a new loss or decades ago, as you've both heard both Lynn and Lee reflect on, those losses stay with us. But I also want to give grace and space that sometimes these holidays can also bring up hard feelings. Not everyone was blessed with a perfect childhood, as Lynn just shared intimately as well. That sometimes we grieve the parents that we didn't get to have. And on the same, we're not always our best parents ourselves. And so sometimes we grieve as we get older, even in our best attempts, what we were able to give our children or maybe not. We also often are here as grievers as our own children. That often as we get older, we reflect along. Even we've had many of my friends in their 80s share with me for the first time a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss. So I want to hold space for all that today, and the authentic relationships that we have, that we grieve with joy, we grieve with sadness, we grieve with anger, confusion all in the same time. But I also want to highlight that we have sort of this unique opportunity, and our grief is part of our mental health. That we see when it is unsupported grief, we see a significant challenge in our mental health, in our social health, our psychological health, even our physical health. There's such a thing as called a broken heart. We actually have more cardiac disease and bereavement than we do the general population. So, this is an invitation to kind of acknowledge how grief has impacted your life journey. And Reverend Lynn and I were just talking about even the change over time that, generations ago, people, you might not have even included your children, or you might not have been included even in a funeral. We didn't talk about those things. We sat quietly. But what we're learning on is that we really do need to talk about it. Those feelings are inside of us, those relationships we grieve. What we also know is the majority of us just need acknowledgement. We need somebody to say the name of the person that we're missing. We need somebody to check in on us, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, or 4th of July. I love fireworks. It's a special holiday in my family. So I grieve a little on 4th of July. And I'm always grateful for my friends who know that. So most of us just need somebody to acknowledge. And I realize that often it's challenges sometimes our norms in growing up, but now we have a chance to shift it. So today we're going to lay a little bit of groundwork in the fundamentals of grief and hope that we can empower you to make new decisions about how you express your grief and or support your friends, the other residents, the caregivers. I know we're on here today. Even, the caregivers and the professionals on the call today, we're humans too.
Amen.
And we're here as grievers. So just want to pause a minute and kind of give space for what do we fear? Why are we fearful about bringing up our grief? Why are we fearful about asking somebody how they're doing when they're grieving?
I again, I can, start that conversation. I feel that sometimes we don't want to burden others with the feelings that we're feeling, with the emotion that we're feeling, and we don't want to make others feel bad because we're not feeling so great right now.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody else agrees with me out there, but that is something that I know it becomes my barrier.
In addition to supporting residents where I work, I also support staff, the housekeepers, who, are intimately involved and develop deep relationships with our residents, our housekeepers, our dining staff. And often they'll tell me, I can't cry at work. I need to just do my job and get through, but I need someone to know how I'm feeling on the inside. And what a huge difference that can make. And I've experienced that as well to tell a pastor, I can't cry about it all day, every day, but I just need to know that you're feeling it. You know how I feel on the inside while I'm putting on at least a straight face on the outside. Not all of us have careers where we have permission to be emotional.
And I think many times in long-term care that gets stifled. Staff don't get that opportunity. They're working so closely with people. And then when they leave for work, they leave to go home, and the next day that person's not there anymore. And they just feel so hurt and alone and blindsided. And I've heard all of these words being told by staff to me, just saying, no one's talking about him anymore. He was so near and dear to me. He was somebody that I cared for 10 years.
Or
And
no one even included me. He just disappeared, and no
yeah.
one thought to tell me.
And residents have also shared that same thing. They were my table mate for 15 years, and all of a sudden they disappeared, and people are telling me it's HIPAA, and I can't find out what happened to them. Are they in the hospital? Did they die? Did they leave? What happened here? And then the rumors start, and they're like, I think he died. I'm not sure, and that's hard. It's hard stuff.
I think both of you are bringing up examples of where we think we're protecting people by not talking about it, right? If I don't bring up their name, then maybe they won't be sad. Or if I don't talk about it, then I don't have to worry about how somebody receives my grief, right? So we have all these myths around grief that really create barriers. I shouldn't bother somebody with my pain. If I only had faith, I wouldn't be struggling so much. Crying makes it worse. I should be over it by now. All these things that we've learned to tell ourselves or we get messages from our culture that somehow grieving's not okay. But what's one thing in life is universal is grief. We're all going to experience loss. It is natural. It is healthy. It is our natural reaction to loving and missing someone or something. And as even Reverend Lynn said earlier, it's not always about a death. What we also know is grief lasts forever, right? How many times do we say, are you over that yet? Or why are you still sad? It's been 5 years. Well, I'm still sad because I love them and I still miss them. I had a very wise mom once tell me, somebody said, "Are you over your daughter yet?" Well, she very quickly said, "I'll be done grieving my daughter when either one, she comes back to life, which we know won't happen, or I stop loving her, and that won't happen either. So I'm going to grieve her my whole life."
Mhm.
Does that mean our grief changes? Absolutely. Sometimes we can grow around our grief, but grief stays with us in a change.
I
But
think
sometimes
one
we're,
way to, oh, go ahead.
no, you go, Lynn.
One way to imagine grief, we talk so much about cholesterol in our bloodstream. I inherited high cholesterol, and we all have cholesterol, but it's important that it stays moving in our bloodstream, that we keep it moving, that it doesn't start to and collect so much that it finally chokes off our circulation. And grief can be like that. It's always going to be in us, but we should need to keep it moving and not stagnate and not let it collect and collect and collect until it's stealing our lives away from us.
We also know we grieve differently, right? So I'm just curious. And again, if you either want to put in the chat, come off mute, or just think for yourself, how do you experience your grief? We all have different coping mechanisms, but I'm curious how some of you experience your grief.
What a great question.
I'm going to give you a little checkbox to just provoke you a little. And I want you to notice that grief has a lot of different domains. It changes our behavior, it changes how we think, it changes our physical bodies. It's emotional, it's developmental. You're going to grieve as a 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 60-year-old, and an 80-year-old. Our grief changes as our world changes. Changes our spirituality, it changes how we socialize. What often happens is we can also grieve in certain clusters. Many of us are more comfortable with different kind of domains of how we express. So I want you just to kind of look through some of these and think about, where do you fall? What are some of the ways that you've experienced your grief? And then I also want you to think a little bit about your family system. How do others in your world experience their grief? How do you observe grief from others? We also know is that grief is often impacted by our cultural background, that there are times that our religion can provide guidance at a time that we don't know what to do, that our religion sometimes gives us guidance around end of life care, guidance in how to plan a funeral, guidance about burial, and even on a year anniversary. I often am very jealous of the Jewish community and some of the rituals they have built into their faith to help guide grief. If nothing more than on the year anniversary, going to the cemetery, and that's when the headstone is placed. So there are times that our faith can guide us, but there are also times that we can also be angry at our faith, and angry at our religion as well.
I give everyone permission to pay attention in your communities, religious or other. When you know you need to turn to someone, just open your heart and look around the room. Or if you are a person who prays, pray about it. Who can I share this with? Who can I tell that I think I'm about to get divorced? Who can I tell that I had an abortion when I was a teenager? Who just ask for guidance and then let that person say, you know, some Holy Spirit told me that maybe you were someone I could talk to. It might not be your pastor, and a good pastor is going to be glad that you found the right person for you. And even if you feel that you need to maybe worship in a different worshiping body for a while or take a break, give yourself permission for that. And any leader in any organization should have the grace to understand that.
Well, and I think, as we think of our long-term settings in your community and the other residents, I think this is something for us to be able to articulate, to be able to honor, and to talk with our staff and our teams about how we want our lives to be honored at end of life, how we want to be cared for. Sometimes there's very specific things about even our body washing and what direction to face, and different prayers to be said. And that is both in our end of life care as well as in our bereavement. And so, for each of you to kind of sit a little bit about what parts of your faith are comforting to you and provide you some guidance in your grief as well. And then you have the power to choose what those parts do bring you comfort.
And even more secular rituals. For example, here in our retirement community, some people love having a celebration of life where we have an open mic and we pass the microphone and people tell stories, funny, sad, why that person was important to them. Some people love that, but just recently I had a resident pull me aside and say, absolutely not. One day when I go, absolutely not. I abhor that. And she mysteriously passed away the next day. So I knew exactly what she did not want. Um, I have a degree in art therapy, and when my mentor died of pancreatic cancer, she had made pre-arrangements. She had set up, designed a group of people. I was one of them, and she wanted the heavy art that she did that was like a visual diary, she wanted it burned. And
Mm.
she gave us that permission and that requirement that these things should not float around. Something that's framed is fair game, but my diary will be burned. And we had a ritual around the fire. Um, Great for her, not great for some people. It was very hard on us to put her art into the fire, piece after piece.
I can imagine that would be really hard. You know, what's interesting
Horrible.
is I was at a concert with my daughter during the winter, and a song played, and I turned to her and I said, I want this played at my funeral. And she's like, seriously, Mom? And I go, no, I think about stuff like that because I don't want this to be a moment of sad. I want you guys to be, these are the types of messages I want you all to have there to support you. So I started keeping, she's like, you're going to need to remind me. I said, I'm going to make it a note on my phone so that if I die, you can go to my notes and you'll be able to find out all those things. So I started keeping funny. I mean, it's kind of ironic, but I started keeping some notes about when I die, this is what I want. So
Absolutely.
decided I needed to do that.
That's a gift to those that you may leave behind.
And Lynn and Lee, I can't see the chat and still do my screen. So I'm just going to ask if you guys can kind of poke in on the chat once in a while. I see it's popping up.
Yeah, I
I
am.
was great. Thank you. I also want to give voice to different types of grief, that there are different events in our life that we can experience different. And so I'm just going to name a few of these because I think sometimes it can be empowering to have language to name our experiences. And again, whether it was recent and decades ago, delayed and anticipatory grief. Sometimes we often say our grief is often delayed till the chaos around us has calmed down, right? There's so much that happens around when a death event occurs that sometimes we don't have a chance to attach our grief and our feelings. Um, I'm going to hit disenfranchised grief. This is a new word that we're starting to really embrace, that sometimes our losses aren't recognized, that we put value, feel this need to compare our losses. But when it's your loss, it is personal. So there's sometimes a stigmatized death about how the person died, that we may not fully appreciate whether a person died from suicide or an overdose or substance use, that somehow they're not allowed to grieve the same way. Or an ex partner. We still grieve them, they're an important part of our life, right? Or a pregnancy loss. Or I had a young woman come up to me the other day, she was 30 years old, and she said, I need to tell you, this is my locket. And I'm scared to tell people, but my locket, one side is my grandpa and one side is my dog. And they are the people who made me feel special in my life. But all my friends think I'm weird. I said, that is not weird. They are the people that you found that valued you and made you feel special.
Mhm.
So, to give language and to give yourself validation for who you grieve, right? Sometimes we grieve people we didn't even get to meet, right? And so being
Mhm.
able to reflect and give voice to that. And I
Yeah,
think
someone
Reverend Lynn's,
reflected that they lost their husband over 30 years ago and that the pain just never leaves you. And
no,
still learning, just wants to keep learning as much as they can about this because it never leaves, which I think
it
is
never
wonderful.
leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When they're part of your identity and part of your relationship and part of your meaning, that stays with you. I
Mhm.
think sometimes we also give voice to ambiguous loss. Something is different than it was supposed to be, but we don't always recognize that, right? And unfortunately, sometimes that's with the loss of our abilities, our health, as that changes through our life as well, too. And I think, Lee, you mentioned this a little earlier too. Sometimes our grief is suffocated at work, right? Or suffocated with our community, our residents, that we're kind of said, don't grieve here, right? Well, this is not a place to bring those feelings. But what kind of messages are we bringing when we say that your grief isn't here? Instead of inviting that in, instead of being authentic and genuine in that. And I know this is something Reverend Lynn and I were just talking about too, is really that collective grief. The collective grief can be when a resident dies, right? You're all mourning the same person. It can also be a collective grief when it's cumulative. Sometimes we just have too much, right? And all at once, our feelings are much bigger than we anticipated. But when we start to think about it, we're like, oh, this happened, they died, this happened. Those are big feelings. So sometimes those feelings catch us by surprise. I know, Lynn, you were going to share also a ritual that you learned from Han as well.
Oh, well, there's ritual and then there is Han. So I think I'll share this image that I learned from my Korean theological sisters. There is a particular form of liberative theology that Korean feminists are creating, and it's called Minjung theology. And in Minjung theology, human suffering is called Han, sometimes spelled with two A's, sometimes with one. And I think the most important part for me to share is that in their model of human suffering, which includes grief and loss, they even believe that we inherit some suffering from previous generations, from our ancestors. And it's something that Carl Jung also believed in, called the collective unconscious, that we're born with already a collection of feelings and happenings and history that's literally like in our bones, in our psyches. And then as we go through life, we keep adding to it. And I was told to imagine this. Imagine a trash compactor. You put some trash in there and you push the button and the compactor compacts it. And then you put more trash in there and you push the button and the compactor compacts it. But after a while, you can push that button and the bag is full. We are not trash compactors, but our society teaches us, so much of our society teaches you to be a pioneer, be strong, be independent, and we just accumulate grief and loss and we keep pushing it down until we can't anymore. And then sometimes something small happens and it blows up, and it's really about something so much more than the one thing that was the one thing too many, the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's the image of Han, that suffering, human suffering is sedimentary. It piles up. And hopefully, if we can help keep that moving, we don't get what they said in the biblical tradition, a heart of stone or a stiff neck. We don't become reified. We stay as elastic as possible in spite of what it means to be human. There's no avoidance of suffering in humanity. The best we can do is be the best of who we are, and that's a huge assignment. And grief is it sort of veils us. It puts us in some muck and mire for a while. So that's Han. I loved that model.
We're going to empower you a few more language, and then we're going to shift a little about where we do put these feelings and what kind of rituals and what kind of support can we get. But we want to continue to name for you, sort of as Reverend Lynn said, what's piling up. That the grief isn't just death, right? It's loss of our health, or loss of our independence, or identity when you stop working, or when you retire, or when you move, or when you're in the residence facility. It's loss of friendships. It's loss when somebody is incarcerated, or immigration. A divorce is loss. Military deployments, job changes. Loneliness is a loss. And loss of our decision-making capabilities, and loss of our independence. So we want to give voice to those experiences that you've had that maybe haven't been recognized as grief, and be able to name that for you. I also just want to name that grief is more than just that feeling, but when a person dies, there are all sorts of secondary losses, right? Lynn and I were just talking about even the financial losses, right? If our partner was the primary financial earner in our household and they die, how does that impact us, right? How does that impact our support system? A lot of my friends will talk about when their partner dies, suddenly they don't get invited to the same events anymore because they're not a couple. What's your social system? Even Lee, you said kind of guarding your grief. Are you invited to parties anymore, or people think you're too sad? Loss of identity as a parent, a mother, a daughter. Loss of dreams of who that person was going to be or how we were going to be together. I think somebody on the today mentioned 30 years ago. You had envisioned 30 more years with your husband. That was a loss of future with them and who they were going to be as you journeyed together through your life. Loss of our self-esteem sometimes. It can kind of kick us back a little. So to kind of name, it's all, there's many more dimensions than just the grief of the person that died. We also want to kind of give pause and let you think about the different people. We grieve differently based on who that person was. Not only who that person was, but our relationship to that person. Was it a positive relationship with our parent, our uncle, our next door neighbor, or was it a negative, right? What was that relationship to the person? How old were you? Were you 5 or 50? How did that person die? All those are going to impact how you grieve and experience your grief. Sometimes we have people do a timeline and we kind of take a look at how your grief has, again, accumulated over the years. And how did that grief change? If somebody did die when you were 5 or 15, how do you reflect on that loss now? What's your understanding of that now? Whether it was an illness or sudden death, all these are variables that kind of bundle together into each event that you experience. But I'm also going to pause because I think sometimes what's as important as how we grieve is how the people around us grieve. And Reverend Lynn and I were just talking about, we have a tendency to put people in buckets of how men grieve, right? Like, what do we say? Let's throw out some stereotypes, right? Men don't cry, men are strong, men are the providers, men are the protectors, right? What if that doesn't fit how they cope and grieve? So I'm going to ask each of you for a minute to think about, I'm going to give some examples where you fall sort of on these two spectrums. Are you an intuitive griever? Do you like to talk? Are you a verbal processor? Do you want to be in a group and share your grief and your feelings? Do you like to listen? Do you like to share? That's an intuitive griever. You feel and express. Are you more of an instrumental griever? Are you a thinker? When there's a problem, you're going to solve it. So even when there's grief or an illness or an event, you're going to go study about it. You're going to get all the books how to do this thing called grief. You're going to read about it. You're going to Google it, right? Or you're going to do. You're going to go build that box. You're going to go play basketball. You're going to play poker. That you're going to do things to cope with your grief and your feelings. So I'm going to ask you to think about where you're kind of at. You can vote yourself, kind of raise or put a thumbs up. If you're more intuitive and a feeling person and a verbal processor, you want people around, you're going to socialize. Are you more an instrumental? You're a doer and a thinker. I'm an instrumental. I'm a doer. I don't do well sitting in my feelings. I want to go do.
So
So,
there's a question in the chat. Someone said, can you have parts of both?
absolutely. And in fact, most of us fall on that spectrum, right? Most of us are going to fall somewhere in the middle. Or maybe, as I was just talking to a gentleman the other day, he's like, well, when my mom died, I was here, but when my wife died, I was here, right? So it can also change a little based on who you're grieving. Yeah.
And in a large family, if it's a well-functioning family, as mine was at the end, it was great. One person was the think and do, one person was the feel and express. They're both important. Somebody's
Mhm.
got to do, but somebody also has to say, but this is also very sad. When my mother was dying, my father sailed right through with the think and do. And I was the feel and express, and he was great. You do that, and I'll do this. Deal. It was perfect until I really wanted to process my feelings with him later. And I learned that he absolutely did not want that. And it made him angry. It made him shut down. It made him mean-spirited. I saw a side of my father that hurts my heart to this day, but I've learned not to force him to be something he isn't. I know he is processing his grief in his own way. He may be crying in the shower. He may be praying in the empty bed.
Mhm.
He's doing it, but he doesn't want to do it with me, and he doesn't want me to call on the annual anniversary of mom's passing to talk about it. It makes him angry, and then that makes me all the more hurt. So I think it's important to recognize the differences, and we can't force someone to be something they're not.
And I think that that's so important to hear that, Lynn. That's very, I think, a very important thing to hear. And I feel that sometimes when you're the thinker and the doer, people think you're stifling your emotions and your feelings, but you might not be. It might, and I think that that's why this is important to see, right on that slide, right in front of you, because that could be the way they're not stifling it. This is what makes them be able to cope and do and be and feel that they're doing what it is that they need to do to get over, or not even get over, but to
To move
process.
through it.
Yeah, to move through it. So I think that because I would look at that, the thinker and the doer as being, oh, they're not talking about it. They need to be expressing it more. They need to be, but that might, because I think I am a thinker and doer now that you put this out there like that.
Yeah,
And I would never want to be accused of not dealing with it.
right.
Because I have, I think I am, I'm trying.
In a different way.
I have
Yeah.
an excellent
Yep.
example. Um, my mother died at a fairly young age, and she died quickly and painfully of lung cancer. And
Mm,
my father was brokenhearted when she passed away. And we went to the funeral home, and the decision was she was able to help make the decisions. It was that her bodily remains would be cremated. And then this is a small town in northern Wisconsin. The choices of urns were just ill-fitting for my father, who was a master woodworker. And I mean, he made roll-top desks and he
oh,
did inlay. And to look at these poorly made things, he just was paralyzed. And being an art therapist, I said, well, Dad, you love to work in wood, and why don't you make an urn for mom? We're not going to use it at the ceremony. We don't need it right away. We're not going to bury her remains. And I can show you a slight example of what he did because it's sitting at my desk. So he made something similar to this, only large enough, about the size of a cookie jar. And that's how he processed his feelings for his bride, my mom. Some of those things for him were very, very private. Their relationship as a married couple was always understood to be very private. The master bedroom was private. Their anniversary was private, and he is a doer, but I know he was feeling his feelings. And if I could show you what he came up with, it is definitely a very feminine vessel. You know, it's like a cookie jar, but it has polka dots in wood dancing along it, and it has gems in it and silver, and it's just
Oh,
beautiful. And it took him a whole year to do it, and that's how he kept it moving.
that's
And I
a
think,
beautiful story.
yeah,
Yeah.
what you both bring up is both being able to name for yourself, maybe where you're at on the spectrum,
Mhm.
but to
Mhm.
name who your support person is and where are they, right? Because as Lynn just shared, sometimes the difficulty is if you don't, but the difficulty becomes interpretation of behavior, right? We just had Mother's Day, and a family I'm working with, her mom had recently died. And so the husband took the kids and left the day, and she was angry. He came home and he said, I thought you wanted a day to be alone. I thought you wanted a day to grieve your mom. She's like, no, I wanted a day to celebrate being a mother with my children and bringing her to my family. He thought he was doing something loving, right? The intention was loving,
Yeah.
but it was interpreted as something very painful. So I just want to kind of highlight to think about who in your world is your support system and maybe be able to articulate where they're at on their spectrum. And also to always give grace between the difference between intention and interpretation. So I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit here. I'm going to just quickly highlight this. And at some point, Lee, you and I can always revisit this. We know children are coming, going every day from the long term care facility. We know
Mhm.
our grandkids, our great grandkids, are sometimes those who just bottle us up with love. But sometimes we're frozen and immobilized how to support them. And they're often what we would say the forgotten mourners. So come back to this another day and talk about how we include children in our grief and how we give them voice and expression because they do grieve and
Mhm.
grieve differently, but appropriately as well. Just shift here a little. Let's just kind of think a minute. You can yell it out. You can type it in the chat. What are the dumb things that people say to us when they're trying to make us feel better in our grief? Any kind of
Mm.
examples for that?
I think a lot of people, when they say, "Oh, I know how you feel," or it's and you haven't ever lost a child, or it's that those can feel a little off at times. It can be it can be hard.
As clergy, I especially cringe when people say it is God's will. Well, what kind of a God, loving God would do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
All the
That's a
things,
theological thing.
Yeah, we
all
got
the
it. We got
things.
it in some parts in the chat. It'll get better. Everything is okay. I understand how you feel. Those sometimes do not feel good to hear that stuff.
Mm.
It's
And
not
often
okay.
these not okay. And often these platitudes become something we try to put a band-aid on, right? That we
Mhm.
try to protect ourselves from the grief by making all these nice cliches and platitudes.
Mhm.
But we know that isn't how we feel, right? What is helpful? Does anybody want to share in the chat? What do you find helpful? What do you wish your friends or family knew that you needed in your grief?
Oh, that's a good one. Because I wish I knew what to say to people when they're experiencing it. So I am curious. I don't know what to say. I will just say to somebody, I don't know what you're feeling, but I'm here to support you. Um, whatever I can do to help. But sometimes that feels empty as well. It can feel empty. What can I do to help? I'm here for you is some of the responses. Those might
Yeah.
be some.
Sometimes practical things. My best friend was really upset when my mom died too. She said, I don't even know what to say, but she drove me everywhere. She drove me everywhere I needed to go. And on that first day, so that she wouldn't cry and so that she could drive safely, she kept passing me mints. And because we're good friends, I took that as comfort and kindness. She was just like, "This is very painful. I don't know what to do. Here, have another piece of candy."
Love that. Someone just said that they had a sister who passed away. Yes, they had a friend whose sister passed away yesterday, and she's struggling with what to say. She doesn't know what to say.
And sometimes sometimes it's not about the words, it's about the presence,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Just being present, present to pain, present to memories. We can't fix it, but we can still be there as a friend. Even in our silence, we often say it's better to listen than to try to fix,
We also
right?
had it's okay to grieve, giving that acknowledgement, saying grieve as long as you need. And someone said, bring food. That's always can be helpful too.
Yeah,
You know,
food.
it can't be, sometimes that's a way we can't show caring and love to somebody is just bringing a simple meal.
Yeah, I think
Um,
showing up is the best way that we can support
yeah.
showing up. Sometimes grief, we're fearful of it, so we stay away instead of leaning in. There are no perfect words, but being present.
I like that. I like that quote you had from Weller on the slide. Grief is not a problem to be solved. That's really important, I think, for me to hear and something just to reflect on when somebody's going through it.
Sharing memories, I think, can be very comforting. When my mother passed, a few of my friends remembered being at my home for a sleepover party. And just simple things like, "Your mom made the best waffles." That was very comforting to me because I hadn't remembered that my mom ever made waffles. Or I had forgotten that we learned to sew on the old-fashioned treadle sewing machines. And my friend said, "Your mom is the one who taught me on how to sew and to do it without breaking my toes on that treadle." So those simple memories. And I think also, if you know the person well enough to say, "I see your mother living inside of you," or "I see your friend living inside of you. I see you carrying your daughter's life forward in who you are."
Oh.
That is empowering, right? It's sort of an assignment to find that place inside of you and do it, be it.
What I want to highlight before we get, I know I'm conscious of the time, is a lot of times there's a lot of language around stages of grief. You're going to feel this, then you're going to do that. I wish I could give you a yardstick, but there's no such thing. As somebody mentioned, 30 years later, you're still grieving. But what we do find is this sort of new, in our grief, loss oriented, remembering, being active in those feelings, while also moving forward. So I think what we have kind of discovered about grief, it is much healthier to bring the person with us as we move forward and finding a new way in our relationship to the person, to our grief, as we also start to move forward. But there are going to be days and times it's going to kick you right back in your grief. Again, whether it's days ago, decades ago, there are going to be days that are hard. And then there are days you're going to look forward to new things and to give yourself permission for both. But as sort as we started today, I want us to wrap around and end a little bit today that we are in Mother's Day, we are in Father's Day, and there are a lot of activations where you might just feel your grief a little bigger. It can be a date on a calendar, it can be a pending anniversary, a birthday, it can be a song on the radio, it can be a show or a commercial, it can be a smell that brings you right back in that moment of in relationship with that person. Lynn and I were just talking about too, sometimes we find comfort in linking objects. I was sharing one of my best friends, she's a hummingbird. So every time I see an image of a hummingbird, I know Karen's with me. I look for hummingbirds. So we can sometimes, or a favorite t shirt or a favorite blanket that connects us with the person that we're missing. So
Mhm.
some of us have favorite objects that we're connected to. Some of us have things that we look for, a butterfly in the window. And being able to think about And I'm gonna have each of you spend a little time today thinking about, are there linking objects? Their days. And I also want to ask you, as we just passed Mother's Day and we're anticipating Father's Day, as you reflect, are there things that you have found helpful? Are there things that you traditionally have done, but now maybe are wanting to change how you honor that person on Mother's Day or Father's Day or other days? We know holidays bring a lot of tradition. So I want to invite you to think a little bit about how you honor. And again, we know not all relationships are perfect. So there can be joy, sadness, pain, and loving feelings all at the same time as we think about Mother's Day and Father's Day.
Beautiful.
Kristen, would you like me to wrap up with the poem I was going to use as the introduction, or do you have another way you would like to wrap this up?
That is perfect. I'm going to give one last sort of guidance and I'm going to kick it to you. So,
Okay.
as we're wrapping up today and we're thinking about these events, what I want to empower you with, back to empowerment, is anticipation sometimes is the hardest. The gloom and doom of a date on the calendar sometimes can hit us in unexpected ways. Make a plan for that day. Think about what's going to be helpful, what's going to be comforting. Communicate those needs so those around you know what you need, interpretation, intention, and give yourself permission to change your plan. You don't always know what you're going to feel or need, and it's okay to change. Be kind to yourself. And I'm going to kick it to you, Reverend Lynn, to kind of close this up. And at the end of the slides, I do have a lot of resources for you that I will share. I will share after today as well.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, Lee. This is a poem that I find very comforting. I use it in many different ways. If for some reason we don't get to the end of it, I will let you know. It's written by Rabbi Alvin Fine, and I can share the text so it could be posted if people are interested. It's called, it relates to the fact that so many things in life are not linear. They might be cyclical or even more complex than that. So the poem is called Birth is a Beginning. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. And life is a journey. From childhood to maturity, and youth to age. From innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing. From foolishness to discretion, and then, perhaps, to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back, we pray, to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding. From fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until, looking backward or ahead, we see that victory, true victory, lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage.
Beautiful. This was a really, really wonderful to have today. I think it was important messaging. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop the recording, but we will stay on just a little bit because sometimes people don't like to raise their hands or give a comment when we're recording. So I will go ahead and I will stop the recording right now, but I do want to say thank you so much for doing this. We really, really do appreciate it. So with that, I'll go ahead and end the recording.